Step aside, sir. You're being flagged for additional screening. I've already been through the metal detector. What's the issue? We need to conduct a full pat-down and search your belongings. I'm a TSA pre-check member. I shouldn't require additional screening. My military ID is right here, sir. Step out of line and follow me to secondary screening. I've done nothing wrong. I'm a veteran with pre-check clearance. You can verify my credentials in your system. I don't need to verify anything. You're coming with me now? This is discriminatory. I've watched you wave through 20 passengers ahead of me. Why am I being singled out? Because you're acting suspiciously and refusing to comply. I'm not refusing. I'm asking why I'm being treated differently than everyone else. You're being detained for interfering with a federal screening process. TSA agents are calling airport police for questioning why I'm the only person you've pulled from this line for additional screening. Federal agents Marcus Webb and Jennifer Caldwell had been with the Transportation Security Administration for 9 and 7 years respectively when they made a decision at a Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport security checkpoint that would destroy their careers and cost the federal government $11.8 million. Webb was 34 years old and Caldwell was 32, both experienced enough to understand TSA protocols for passenger screening, but apparently convinced that their judgment about who looked suspicious was more reliable than screening technology and pre-check verification systems. One Thursday morning at Terminal D, they saw a black man in his early 40s proceeding through the pre-check security lane and decided without any alarm triggering, without any legitimate security concern, without following proper procedures that he required enhanced screening and detention. That man was Lieutenant Colonel David Richardson, a 43-year-old Air Force veteran with 21 years of military service, including 3 combat deployments, who was traveling to San Antonio for a speaking engagement at a military conference. What Webb and Caldwell did next, ignoring his military credentials and pre-check status, subjecting him to invasive searches despite no security flags, detaining him in front of hundreds of travelers, and calling airport police when he questioned the discriminatory treatment, would become evidence of how racial profiling in federal security screening destroys dignity and costs taxpayers millions. The detention would be captured on security cameras and witness phones. The lawsuit would be comprehensive, and the question that would haunt the Transportation Security Administration was this: how did 2 agents with combined 14 complaints for discriminatory screening of passengers of color remain in security roles long enough to detain a decorated military officer in front of an entire terminal? A black man in his early 40s wearing business casual attire and carrying a leather carry-on bag, Lieutenant Colonel David Richardson was proceeding through the TSA pre-check security lane at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport Terminal D at 6:47 on a Thursday morning in September. His military identification card and TSA pre-check boarding pass had been scanned and verified. He had removed his laptop from his bag as required. He had walked through the metal detector without triggering any alarm. No security flag, no suspicious items, no legitimate basis for enhanced screening. Just a decorated veteran traveling for professional obligations using the expedited screening program he qualified for through military service. But agents Webb and Caldwell saw him through assumptions so distorted by racial bias that they could not process a black man in the pre-check lane as anything other than someone requiring additional scrutiny. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport is one of the busiest aviation hubs in the United States, serving over 75 million passengers annually. Terminal D houses international and domestic gates, with modern security checkpoints processing thousands of travelers daily. The security area is configured with multiple screening lanes, standard screening for general passengers, TSA pre-check lanes for approved travelers, and clear lanes for expedited biometric verification. The checkpoint area is spacious with polished tile floors, ceiling-mounted cameras recording all activity, and digital displays showing wait times and security procedures. The Thursday morning in question was typical for the airport during business travel hours. The temperature outside was 78 degrees, clear skies promising good flying conditions. Inside Terminal D, the security checkpoint was moderately busy with steady flow rather than overwhelming crowds. Business travelers dominated the early morning traffic, many heading to meetings and conferences throughout the country. The pre-check lane where Richardson was processing had approximately 15 travelers in queue, moving efficiently through screening with minimal delays. The area serves a diverse passenger population representing Dallas-Fort Worth's status as a major business and tourism hub. The security checkpoint staff includes TSA agents, airport police officers, and airline personnel assisting travelers with questions. The atmosphere during normal operations is professional and efficient, with most passengers proceeding through screening in under 10 minutes when using pre-check credentials. TSA PreCheck is a trusted traveler program that allows low-risk passengers, including military service members, to experience expedited security screening. PreCheck members proceed through dedicated lanes, keep shoes and belts on, keep laptops in bags, and generally experience minimal physical screening unless technology detects potential security concerns. The program is designed to enhance security while improving the travel experience for vetted passengers who have undergone background checks and pose minimal security risk. David Richardson had been enrolled in TSA PreCheck since 2015, maintaining continuous eligibility through his military service and clean background. He traveled frequently for both military obligations and civilian speaking engagements, using PreCheck credentials at airports throughout the country without incident. He understood security protocols, cooperated fully with screening procedures, and expected the professional treatment that PreCheck status and military credentials typically ensured. That Thursday morning, Richardson was traveling from Dallas to San Antonio for a conference hosted by the Air Force Association, where he was scheduled to speak about leadership development and veteran transition programs. His flight was scheduled to depart at 8:15 with boarding beginning at 7:45. He had arrived at the airport at 6:30, allowing adequate time for security screening and reaching his gate. He was wearing gray slacks, a navy blue button-down shirt, and black dress shoes. His carry-on bag contained his laptop, presentation materials, a change of clothes for the 2-day conference, and his military service records for reference during his presentation. He had no idea that federal agents Marcus Webb and Jennifer Caldwell were about to turn a routine security screening into a 2-hour detention that would become a federal lawsuit and national controversy about racial profiling in airport security. Lieutenant Colonel David James Richardson had dedicated 21 years to military service with distinction and commitment. Born in Detroit and raised in a military family, his father having served 30 years in the Army, Richardson had grown up understanding discipline, service, and sacrifice. He had attended the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, graduating in 2003 with a degree in aerospace engineering and a commission as a second lieutenant. His Air Force career had been marked by excellence and progression through increasing responsibility. He had completed pilot training at Vance Air Force Base in Oklahoma, earning his wings and qualifying to fly C-130 Hercules transport aircraft. For 8 years, he had flown tactical airlift missions supporting combat operations, humanitarian relief efforts, and training exercises across multiple continents. He had deployed 3 times to combat zones in Iraq and Afghanistan, flying missions that delivered troops, equipment, and supplies under challenging and dangerous conditions. Richardson had been promoted to captain in 2007 and to major in 2012, each promotion reflecting strong performance evaluations and demonstrated leadership. He had commanded a flight of 40 personnel, served as an instructor pilot training junior aviators, and completed a master's degree in organizational leadership through an Air Force educational program. His performance had earned him selection for lieutenant colonel in 2018, a competitive promotion that only 50% of eligible officers achieve. At the rank of lieutenant colonel, Richardson had transitioned from flying operations to staff assignments focused on force development and readiness. He had served at Air Force Personnel Center working on officer assignment policies, at Air Education and Training Command, developing pilot training curriculum improvements, and currently worked at the Pentagon in a joint assignment coordinating airlift operations with other military services. His awards included the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, the Air Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters for combat missions, and the Aerial Achievement Medal for sustained performance in flight operations. At 43 years old, Lieutenant Colonel Richardson represented exactly the kind of military professional that the Air Force develops through decades of training, education, and operational experience. He was a field-grade officer with command experience, combat deployments, and expert knowledge in aviation operations. He held a top-secret security clearance that required extensive background investigation and continuous monitoring. He had dedicated his adult life to serving his country, and he expected the professional courtesy and respect that military credentials and pre-check status should ensure during routine travel. That Thursday morning, Richardson had driven from his temporary residence in Arlington, Virginia, where he was stationed at the Pentagon, to Dallas-Fort Worth Airport for his connecting flight to San Antonio. He had flown from Washington Dulles to Dallas the previous evening, stayed overnight with family in the area, and was completing the second leg of his journey. He checked in online using his airline mobile application, received his boarding pass showing TSA pre-check status, and arrived at the airport in plenty of time for his morning departure. He had proceeded to Terminal D security checkpoint, entering the TSA pre-check lane designated for approved travelers. He had presented his military identification card and boarding pass to the document checker, who scanned both items and verified his credentials in the TSA system. The verification showed Richardson's pre-check eligibility, his military status, and his clean background with no security flags or concerns. The document checker had waved him through to the screening area. Richardson had placed his carry-on bag on the conveyor belt for X-ray screening, removed his laptop and placed it in a separate bin as required even for pre-check passengers, and walked through the metal detector at the agent's direction. The metal detector did not alarm. The X-ray screening of his bag showed no prohibited items or security concerns. Every element of the screening process indicated that Richardson was exactly what his credentials showed: a low-risk trusted traveler with military service and pre-check approval. But federal agents Marcus Webb and Jennifer Caldwell, working the pre-check screening area that morning, saw a black man proceeding through security and made a decision based not on security protocols or screening results, but on racial bias that would cost them their careers and cost the federal government nearly $12 million. Federal agents Marcus Webb and Jennifer Caldwell had accumulated complaint histories that should have resulted in their removal from passenger screening roles years before they encountered Lieutenant Colonel Richardson. Webb had been with the Transportation Security Administration for 9 years, compiling 8 formal complaints during that time. Caldwell had been with TSA for 7 years, accumulating 6 complaints. Combined, they had 14 documented complaints, with 11 involving allegations of discriminatory screening, harassment, or inappropriate treatment of passengers of color. The complaints revealed consistent patterns. Both agents subjected Black and Hispanic passengers to enhanced screening, invasive pat-downs, and prolonged questioning at rates significantly higher than white passengers, even when screening technology showed no security concerns. They questioned passengers of color about travel purposes, destinations, and personal information unrelated to security screening. They made comments suggesting skepticism about whether passengers legitimately qualified for pre-check status or could afford their travel. In 2016, Webb had detained a black businessman for 35 minutes, subjecting him to multiple pat-downs and bag searches despite X-ray and metal detector screenings showing no concerns. The passenger had filed a complaint noting that Webb questioned whether he really worked for the company on his business card and whether his pre-check status was legitimate. The TSA ruled the complaint not sustained. In 2017, Caldwell had subjected a Hispanic woman to an invasive full-body pat-down in a private screening room despite the body scanner showing no anomalies. The woman filed a complaint stating that Caldwell had made comments about foreign travel stamps in her passport and questioned whether she had family in Mexico involved in smuggling. The TSA sustained the complaint and issued Caldwell a written reprimand with diversity training. In 2018, Webb had pulled a black family from the pre-check line, claiming their children's behavior was suspicious, despite the fact that the children were quietly following their parents through screening. Webb had searched every piece of the family's luggage and questioned the parents extensively about their travel plans. The family filed a complaint. The TSA ruled it not sustained. In 2019, Caldwell had required a black military member in uniform to undergo enhanced screening, including removal of boots and full pat-down despite pre-check status and lack of any security flags. The service member filed a complaint noting that white military members in the same line were waved through without additional screening. The TSA ruled it not sustained. In 2020, Webb had detained a Hispanic attorney traveling for court proceedings, questioning whether the legal documents in his bag were legitimate and whether he was really an attorney despite Bar Association identification. The attorney had missed his flight due to the extended detention. He filed a complaint. The TSA ruled it not sustained. In 2021, both Webb and Caldwell working together had subjected a black woman with pre-check status to enhanced screening, full pat-down, and complete bag search despite no security concerns. When the woman questioned why she was selected when others were not, Caldwell had stated that they conduct random additional screening, though the woman had observed that every passenger selected appeared to be a person of color. The woman filed a complaint. The TSA sustained it and issued both agents written reprimands with mandatory bias training. In 2022, Webb had pulled a black professor from the pre-check line, claiming his laptop appeared suspicious on the X-ray, despite the X-ray operator indicating no concerns. Webb had detained the professor for 25 minutes, causing him to miss his flight. The professor filed a complaint noting that his laptop was standard equipment with no modifications. The TSA ruled it not sustained. Every complaint demonstrated the same pattern. Webb and Caldwell applied enhanced screening to passengers of color at disproportionate rates, questioned credentials and travel purposes in ways they did not apply to white passengers, and used subjective claims of suspicious behavior or random selection to justify discriminatory treatment. The Transportation Security Administration had 14 documented complaints spanning multiple years across two agents frequently working together. They had sustained 2 complaints. They had clear evidence of racial bias in screening practices. They had multiple opportunities to reassign or terminate Webb and Caldwell. They left them in passenger screening roles where their bias continued affecting travelers. Do you think federal agents should be removed from public-facing screening roles after 2 sustained complaints for discriminatory treatment, rather than being allowed to accumulate 6 to 8 complaints each? Drop your answer below. Lieutenant Colonel Richardson walked through the metal detector at 6:47 without triggering any alarm. The TSA agent monitoring the detector, a different agent not involved in what would follow, nodded for him to proceed to collect his belongings from the X-ray conveyor belt. Richardson walked to the belt where his carry-on bag and laptop bin were emerging from the X-ray machine. The X-ray operator had identified no concerns and was waving passengers forward to retrieve their items. Richardson reached for his bag when Federal Agent Marcus Webb stepped in front of him, blocking access to his belongings. "Step aside, sir. You're being flagged for additional screening." Richardson looked at Webb, confused. Nothing had alarmed. No agent had indicated any security concern before this moment. "I've already been through the metal detector. What's the issue?" The detector didn't alarm. Webb gestured toward a cordoned area used for enhanced screening. "We need to conduct a full pat-down and search your belongings." Richardson maintained his composure, though his confusion was growing. This was his first time being selected for additional screening in 9 years of using pre-check credentials. "I'm a TSA pre-check member. I shouldn't require additional screening. My military ID is right here." He pointed to the military identification card he was still holding in his hand, the same credential he had presented moments earlier for document verification. Jennifer Caldwell joined Webb, standing beside him in a manner that created a physical barrier between Richardson and his belongings on the conveyor belt. "Sir, step out of line and follow me to secondary screening. This is where bias becomes impenetrable." When federal agents have decided based on race that someone requires enhanced scrutiny, credentials become irrelevant. Military service means nothing. Pre-check verification means nothing. Lack of security flags means nothing. Only the assumption remains. Richardson took a slow breath, aware that other passengers were now watching the interaction. "I've done nothing wrong. I'm a veteran with pre-check clearance. My military ID shows I'm an active duty lieutenant colonel. You can verify my credentials in your system right now." Webb's voice became more assertive, his posture more aggressive. "I don't need to verify anything. You're coming with me now." Richardson glanced at the growing line of passengers behind him, many pulling out phones, several recording the confrontation. He looked back at Webb and Caldwell. "This is discriminatory. I've watched you wave through 20 passengers ahead of me in this line. Why am I being singled out when nothing has alarmed and I have pre-check status?" Caldwell stepped closer, her voice sharp. "Because you're acting suspiciously and refusing to comply." Richardson stared at her in disbelief. "I'm not refusing. I'm asking why I'm being treated differently than everyone else. I'm a military officer with top-secret clearance traveling on pre-check credentials that your colleague verified 3 minutes ago. I haven't triggered any alarms." I'm asking for an explanation of why I'm being selected for enhanced screening. Webb reached for Richardson's arm as if to physically direct him to secondary screening. You're being detained for interfering with a federal screening process. We're calling airport police. Richardson pulled his arm away, his voice remaining controlled but showing the strain of maintaining composure. For questioning why I'm the only person you've pulled from this line for additional screening. For asking you to explain the basis for enhanced screening when no security flag has been raised. By this point, the security checkpoint had effectively stopped processing passengers. Other travelers in line were watching, many recording video. A TSA supervisor, noticing the commotion, approached from the checkpoint podium. The supervisor, whose name was Robert Martinez and who had worked for TSA for 15 years, assessed the situation quickly. "What's going on here?" Webb turned toward Martinez. "This passenger is refusing secondary screening and interfering with the checkpoint operation." Martinez looked at Richardson, noting his military bearing, professional attire, and the military identification card visible in his hand. He looked at the checkpoint equipment, which showed no alarms or flags. Did the metal detector alarm? No, Webb admitted. Did the X-ray show any concerns with his baggage? No. Martinez turned to Richardson. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Richardson handed over his phone showing his mobile boarding pass with TSA pre-check clearly indicated. Martinez examined it, then looked at his own tablet computer showing checkpoint activity logs. The system showed Richardson's credentials had been verified, his pre-check status was valid, and no security flags existed. "He's pre-check verified," Martinez said to Webb and Caldwell. "No alarms triggered. What's the basis for enhanced screening?" Caldwell responded quickly, apparently having prepared her justification. "We observed suspicious behavior. He was looking around nervously and appeared uncertain about screening procedures." Richardson's composure cracked slightly, his voice rising though still controlled. "That's completely false. I've been through airport security hundreds of times. I proceeded through screening following every protocol. I've been calm and cooperative until these agents blocked my access to my belongings and selected me for enhanced screening with no explanation." A white passenger who had been behind Richardson in line spoke up, her voice carrying across the checkpoint area. "I was right behind him. He wasn't acting suspiciously at all. He went through screening normally. They've pulled him aside for no reason." Another passenger, a white man in business attire, added his observation. "I watched the whole thing. He walked through the metal detector like everyone else. It didn't alarm. They stopped him when he went to get his bag. This looks like profiling." Martinez looked at Webb and Caldwell, his expression showing concern about the situation developing in front of multiple witnesses with recording devices. "Agent Webb, Agent Caldwell, please step aside with me." The three TSA personnel moved several feet away, speaking in lowered voices but still visible to passengers and cameras. Their conversation appeared heated, with Martinez gesturing toward Richardson and then toward the checkpoint equipment. While they conferred, an airport police officer arrived, responding to Webb's earlier request for police presence. The officer, whose name tag read Johnson, approached Richardson. "Sir, what's the situation here?" Richardson, now separated from TSA agents and facing a police officer, felt the weight of being a black man in America despite his military rank, despite his credentials, despite having done nothing wrong. He had seen this scenario too many times, knew how quickly situations could escalate when police arrived, and made a conscious decision to remain absolutely calm and cooperative while asserting his rights. "Officer, my name is Lieutenant Colonel David Richardson, United States Air Force. I'm traveling to San Antonio for a military conference. I proceeded through TSA pre-check screening without incident. No alarms triggered. These agents selected me for additional screening with no explanation despite my pre-check status and military credentials. When I asked why I was being singled out, they claimed I was interfering and called for police. I've been cooperative. I've questioned the discriminatory treatment, which is my right, but I haven't interfered with anything." Officer Johnson looked at Richardson's military identification, then at the TSA agents conferring nearby, then at the dozens of passengers watching and recording. "You have your boarding pass and identification?" "Yes, sir. My boarding pass shows pre-check status. My military ID shows I'm an active duty officer. Both were verified by TSA when I entered the checkpoint." Johnson reviewed the documents, clearly recognizing the sensitive nature of detaining a military officer in front of an audience of witnesses. Martinez returned from his conversation with Webb and Caldwell, addressing Johnson. "Officer, this appears to be a misunderstanding. The passenger is verified pre-check with military credentials. No security flags were raised. I'm going to allow him to proceed to his gate." Webb interrupted, his voice betraying frustration. We have authority to conduct enhanced screening regardless of pre-check status based on observed behavior. Martinez responded firmly, clearly conscious of the crowd and cameras. And I have authority as checkpoint supervisor to override that decision when the basis appears questionable and no security concerns exist. This passenger is cleared to proceed. He turned to Richardson. Sir, I apologize for the delay. You're free to collect your belongings and proceed to your gate. Richardson looked at Martinez, then at Webb and Caldwell, whose expressions showed anger at being overridden, then at Officer Johnson, who was clearly relieved to avoid further escalation. I'm going to collect my belongings, but I'm also going to file formal complaints about this discriminatory treatment. I've served this country for 21 years. I've flown combat missions. I hold top-secret clearance. And I've just been detained at a security checkpoint, accused of suspicious behavior and interference, treated like a criminal in front of hundreds of people, because 2 federal agents saw a black man and decided I needed additional scrutiny despite every security measure confirming I pose no threat. He collected his bag and laptop, placed his military ID back in his wallet, and walked toward his gate. The entire detention had lasted 23 minutes, causing him to rush to reach his flight before boarding closed. Behind him, passengers were already posting videos to social media. The detention of a military officer at airport security, with witnesses contradicting TSA claims of suspicious behavior, was spreading across the internet even before Richardson reached his gate. Within 2 hours, the videos had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. Hashtags about TSA racial profiling and military veteran mistreatment were trending. News organizations were requesting comment from TSA and the airport. Military advocacy organizations were issuing statements condemning the treatment of a service member. Lieutenant Colonel Richardson made his flight with minutes to spare. During the flight to San Antonio, he documented every detail of the encounter while the memory was fresh. He arrived in San Antonio, delivered his conference presentation on leadership and veteran transition, and spent the evening researching civil rights attorneys who specialized in federal employee misconduct cases. The videos continued spreading. Major news networks picked up the story. The hashtag reached millions of impressions, and David Richardson had retained one of the nation's most respected civil rights litigation firms to pursue a federal lawsuit. Should federal screening agents be required to document specific observable security concerns before subjecting pre-check passengers to enhanced screening? Let me know what you think. The media response was immediate and intense. Security camera footage from the airport combined with multiple passenger videos showed the complete encounter. Richardson proceeding through screening without incident. No alarms triggering. Webb and Caldwell blocking his access to belongings and demanding enhanced screening. Richardson calmly asking for explanation and showing military credentials. Webb and Caldwell claiming suspicious behavior despite witness accounts contradicting that characterization. The supervisor intervening and allowing Richardson to proceed after recognizing the situation was untenable. The coverage expanded from social media to national news within 24 hours. The narrative was clear and damning. Decorated Air Force officer detained at airport security despite pre-check and military credentials. TSA agents call police on combat veteran for questioning discriminatory screening. Black lieutenant colonel subjected to enhanced screening while white passengers wave through. Military veteran with top-secret clearance treated as security threat at Dallas Airport. The Air Force Association, where Richardson was scheduled to speak, issued a statement condemning the treatment of military service members at security checkpoints. The Military Officers Association of America called for investigation into TSA screening practices. The NAACP demanded accountability for agents Webb and Caldwell. Civil rights organizations focused on TSA's pattern of disproportionate screening of passengers of color. The Transportation Security Administration placed Webb and Caldwell on administrative leave pending investigation. The investigation took 12 weeks, conducted by TSA's Office of Inspection and both the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General's office given the high-profile nature of the case. The findings were comprehensive and damning. Webb and Caldwell had subjected Lieutenant Colonel Richardson to enhanced screening without legitimate security basis. Security footage and checkpoint logs confirmed that no alarms had triggered, no X-ray concerns existed, and Richardson's pre-check credentials were valid. Multiple witnesses contradicted Webb and Caldwell's claims that Richardson exhibited suspicious behavior or refused to comply. Analysis of Webb and Caldwell's screening patterns over the previous year showed statistically significant disparity in their selection of passengers of color for enhanced screening compared to their selection of white passengers, even controlling for pre-check status and lack of security flags. Webb and Caldwell were terminated 13 weeks after the incident. The termination letters were nearly identical in their assessment. Agent Webb conducted enhanced screening of a passenger without legitimate security justification, subjected a military officer to discriminatory treatment based on race, and made false claims about passenger behavior that were contradicted by multiple witnesses and security footage. This incident represents the 9th complaint against Agent Webb involving discriminatory screening practices. Despite prior discipline and training, Agent Webb has demonstrated persistent racial bias incompatible with federal employment in security screening. Employment is terminated effective immediately. Both agents' names were entered into federal databases noting the termination reasons, effectively ending their careers in federal law enforcement or security roles. Webb was 34 years old and Caldwell was 32 when their careers ended. The federal lawsuit Richardson filed was extensive and unprecedented in scope. He sued Marcus Webb and Jennifer Caldwell individually for violation of constitutional rights, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation through false claims of suspicious behavior, and deprivation of rights under color of federal authority. He sued the Transportation Security Administration and the Department of Homeland Security for failure to train, failure to supervise, negligent retention of agents with documented patterns of discriminatory conduct, maintaining policies that permitted racial profiling in screening procedures, and violating his rights under the Fourth Amendment prohibition of unreasonable searches and the Fifth Amendment due process protections. The Department of Justice attorneys defending the federal government reviewed security footage, witness statements, the internal investigation findings, Webb and Caldwell's combined complaint histories, and statistical analysis of their screening patterns. Their conclusion was unequivocal. The case was indefensible, and settlement was necessary to avoid worse outcomes at trial. The federal government settled 16 months after the incident. The settlement was $11.8 million, one of the largest civil rights settlements ever paid in an airport security discrimination case. Lieutenant Colonel Richardson donated $2 million to veterans organizations providing legal assistance and advocacy for service members experiencing discrimination. Should federal agencies be required to remove agents from public contact roles after one sustained complaint for discriminatory treatment, given the constitutional implications of their authority? Comment your thoughts below. Lieutenant Colonel David Richardson testified before the House Committee on Homeland Security 14 months after the incident. The hearing room was filled with military veterans, civil rights advocates, TSA employees concerned about agency practices, and journalists covering federal security policy. His testimony in full military uniform was powerful and received national coverage. I have served in the United States Air Force for 21 years. I have flown combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. I have commanded personnel and aircraft worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I hold top-secret security clearance that requires extensive background investigation every 5 years. I have dedicated my adult life to defending this country and the Constitution that guarantees equal protection under law. He paused, maintaining direct eye contact with committee members. On that September morning at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, I proceeded through security screening as I have done hundreds of times throughout my career. I presented valid credentials. I walked through a metal detector that did not alarm. My baggage was X-rayed with no concerns detected. By every objective security measure, I posed no threat and qualified for expedited screening through the pre-check program designed specifically for low-risk travelers like military service members. Another pause as the weight of his testimony settled over the room. Agents Webb and Caldwell saw me and decided I required enhanced screening. Not because security technology detected anything concerning, not because I violated any protocol, but because I am a black man, and in their biased judgment, black men require additional scrutiny regardless of credentials, service, or security screening results. When I asked why I was being singled out, they claimed I was acting suspiciously and interfering with federal screening. Multiple witnesses confirmed I had done neither. Security cameras confirmed I had done neither. But these agents were willing to lie, to call airport police, to detain a military officer in front of hundreds of people, rather than admit their selection was based on racial bias. His voice remained measured but carried unmistakable authority born from military command experience. Agents Webb and Caldwell had 14 combined complaints for discriminatory screening practices. 14. The Transportation Security Administration knew about their patterns. 2 complaints had been sustained. Training was mandated. Written reprimands were issued. Yet both agents remained in screening roles where their bias continued affecting innocent travelers. This was not an isolated incident. This was the predictable outcome of a system that treats discrimination complaints as minor administrative matters rather than fundamental violations of constitutional rights that federal agents are sworn to protect. The conclusion was direct and reflected his military background's emphasis on accountability. When federal agents abuse their authority to subject citizens to discriminatory treatment, when they lie about passenger behavior to justify that discrimination, when they continue in those roles despite documented patterns of bias, the system has failed. The TSA is not merely an inconvenience travelers endure. These are federal agents with authority to detain, to search, to deny travel. When that authority is exercised based on racial bias rather than legitimate security concerns, it violates everything I have spent 21 years defending. If a decorated military officer with top-secret clearance can be detained and humiliated at airport security because of his race, what happens to ordinary citizens who lack military rank or resources to challenge that treatment? The hearing room was silent, except for the sound of camera shutters when he finished. Should pre-check screening selections for enhanced security measures be subject to mandatory supervisor review before passengers are detained? Drop your answer in the comments. This case was not about one screening incident or 2 agents detaining 1 passenger. This was about a federal security system that allowed Marcus Webb and Jennifer Caldwell to accumulate 14 combined complaints over multiple years without removal from screening roles. This was about an agency that treated bias training as sufficient remedy despite statistical evidence that training did not change agent behavior toward passengers of color. This was about a culture within TSA that permitted subjective judgments about suspicious behavior to override objective security screening results, creating opportunities for racial bias to masquerade as security protocol. 14 complaints across 2 agents working together. That is not random difficulty or passenger misunderstanding. That is documented pattern of racial profiling. A pattern the Transportation Security Administration had in reports, sustained in investigations, and failed to address adequately until those agents detained a military officer whose credentials and professional standing enabled effective legal challenge amplified by public outrage. The detention of Lieutenant Colonel Richardson was the inevitable result of inadequate accountability in federal screening operations. Webb and Caldwell believed they could select passengers for enhanced screening based on racial bias without career consequences, because the agency had taught them through years of minimal discipline that complaints would result in training requirements and written reprimands rather than termination. They were wrong. But only because this time their target was a decorated combat veteran whose military service generated public sympathy and media attention that forced accountability, the system would not have provided for ordinary travelers experiencing identical treatment. Richardson's lawsuit cost the federal government $11.8 million. That is accountability. Webb and Caldwell's careers are over. That is consequence. The TSA announced new oversight procedures for enhanced screening selections. That is institutional response. But settlements and policy announcements do not undo the humiliation of being detained at airport security while hundreds of people watch and record. They do not restore the dignity of having your military service and credentials questioned by federal agents who see your race before they see your uniform. They do not erase the message that even combat deployments, even top-secret clearance, even 21 years defending your country is insufficient protection from agents who have decided based on skin color that you look suspicious. The real question is, what changes now? Does TSA finally remove agents after one sustained discrimination complaint given their federal authority over constitutional rights? Does the agency finally implement objective standards for enhanced screening that eliminate opportunities for racial bias? Do we finally acknowledge that allowing subjective judgments about suspicious behavior without objective security basis creates systemic discrimination regardless of training programs? Because if we do not fix the systems that kept Webb and Caldwell in screening roles despite 14 combined complaints, If we do not address the culture that permitted them to override pre-check verification and security technology based on racial assumptions, then we are simply waiting for the next agents, the next veteran or business traveler or family. The next airport detention proving that federal security screening remains infected with racial bias that no amount of diversity training has eliminated. Comment if you believe this should be law. Federal agents conducting passenger screening who receive one sustained complaint for discriminatory treatment must be immediately removed from public contact roles and prohibited from screening duties. Agents who subject pre-check passengers to enhanced screening must document specific observable security concerns subject to supervisor review before detention occurs. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability for federal agents requires public exposure and institutional change demands sustained pressure, then hit that subscribe button. We are not stopping. We are going to keep exposing these patterns. We are going to keep demanding better. We are going to keep fighting for the veterans, the travelers, the citizens who deserve to move through public spaces without being subjected to racial profiling by federal agents sworn to protect constitutional rights. This is not just about two agents or one veteran or one airport. This is about all of us and the federal security system we choose to tolerate or the system we demand must change to protect equal treatment under law.